Got it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
You gotta talk into the microphone.
Exactly.
Yeah, we've got
Thank you, thank you. Good evening and welcome to the summer quarterly meeting of the Coasters, or as we are officially known, the North County Coastal Group affiliated with the San Diego chapter of the Sierra Club, by Coasters. Obviously, I'm not Sally Prendergast. I'm pinch hitting for Sally tonight. Sally is called away to duties dealing with her family on the East Coast. So she has left me to try to carry on in her stead. A couple of announcements before we dive into what we think is going to be a really interesting evening for you. We are, let's see, which one should I do first? The 75th anniversary of the Sierra Club, the San Diego chapter of the Sierra Club, will be celebrated this October 1st. And if you haven't heard about it, you can get information at the Sierra Club website. We've got a flyer over on the table as well. We encourage everybody to attend. It should be a great event. And I know there will be a small charge for the food that will be served at the event. There'll be all kinds of activities associated with it as well. So that's October 1st. And it will be held in San Diego County Park, which is pretty local for us here in the Coasters. There is the I Like a Clean San Diego is sponsoring their annual coastal cleanup project. I understand that signups can be done starting on September 1st. And Paige, can you jump up and fill us in?
yeah.
Yeah, okay. So the Coasters Group is going to partner with Preserve Talavera to sponsor this particular site. It's the El Salto Falls, which is behind, it's on Buena Vista Creek. It's a Native American, the Luiseno group of Indians that it's a sacred site. So hopefully you can come. It's September 23rd, 9 till noon. It's a pretty impacted area because there's a lot of campments there and a lot of trash. So we need as many folks as we can get.
Thank you. We will have elections coming up for the officers that serve in the leadership positions for the Coaster Group. If you are interested in running for one of those positions, contact Richard Miller, who's the chapter director, and he will give you the information you need to put your name, your hat in the ring. And with that, I'd like to ask the members of the currently serving on the executive committee if they would stand up and wave at the crowd. Thank you. They're the ones that do all the hard work behind the scenes. We have, in addition to our two very special guests tonight, we have another guest that has joined us this evening. And I'd like him to stand up and wave to the crowd as well. And that's our specialist, Carl Aldinger. Carl. So almost all of you must be Carl. We're pleased tonight to bring you two speakers who will address environmental issues that are important to Sierra Club members. And to first lead off tonight, we'll have Miss Crystal Najera, who is the sustainability manager with the city of Encinitas. And I got her to admit to me how long she's been working with the city. It's been a few years, and so and she's done a terrific job there, particularly in the three areas I'd like to highlight. The establishment of San Diego Community Power was a task that a lot of people had a lot of effort went into on a number of fronts. And Crystal was one of those people pushing on San Diego Community Power within the system for the city of Encinitas. She has helped author and implement a award-winning, well thought of climate action plan for the city, which contains not only some nice goals for the city, but actually actions to reach those goals. And not every climate action plan has the action part built into it. And she worked on getting the building electrification ordinance across the finish line for the city, making Encinitas one of the first city in the county of San Diego to have a comprehensive electrification ordinance. And actually, I believe was the 50th city in the state to develop such an ordinance. So she's going to bring us up to speed on recent developments with the unfortunate lawsuit that is thrown a bit of a monkey wrench into the implementation of the building electrification movement. She'll give us some information on that and other things related to environmental issues that the city is working on. So please give Crystal a warm welcome.
All for letting me attend. I wanted to thank a few of those you in the crowd who actually participated in our first adoption of our building electrification ordinance. I'm proud that helped with that. So thanks to you that we have the ordinance that we have. So diving right in. Yep. So as Harold mentioned, we have a climate action plan at the city of Encinitas that has a goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 44% by 2030. And one of the big components of that is reducing emissions in buildings. And so that comes from natural gas and electricity. Those are the two pieces of the pie that are on that chart up there. This pie chart is from our 2012 emissions inventory, which is the baseline for our climate action plan. So what we call building decarbonization in the city of Encinitas is kind of two components. One is electrification of appliances and buildings, and then also energy efficiency. So you can do that in a number of ways. The goal is really to convert all of your appliances that are run on natural gas to being run on electricity. So that's converting to heat pump water heaters, heat pump heating systems and air conditioning systems, induction cooking, and then also your gas dryers to electric as well. And then there's some additional components to that make it all work, which includes rooftop solar and having an upgraded electric panel and things like that. And then you can throw energy efficiency on top of that, and you're doing a whole heck of a lot to reduce carbon that is being emitted because of the use of your building appliances. And so the way that we do that at the city and encourage and require people in Encinitas to do so is by, we've got a state building code, and what we do in Encinitas is we adopt a REACH code. And so what that does is go beyond what the state code requires and require even more to electrify buildings. And so a couple years ago, we did that, and we have actually not just our building electrification ordinance or section of our code, but we've actually got 4 different sections of our code that address some version of building decarbonization to either reduce energy use or eliminate carbon directly through the all electric requirements. So we've got residential energy efficiency, non-residential energy efficiency requirements, the all electric requirement, and then also non-residential solar. And we can go with okay, thanks. So covering the all electric requirement, Encinitas is pretty advanced compared to some of the other 50 that are around the state. We basically require all new buildings to be all electric when they come for a permit to get built. There's a couple exceptions. One is for essential facilities and one is for restaurants with a business related reason to cook with a flame. Those are pretty high bars, and it's essentially, for all intents and purposes, a complete ban on all new homes installing natural gas lines. Unfortunately, which Harold alluded to, there's been a recent court case in the Ninth Circuit called California Restaurant Association versus the City of Berkeley. And it's gone a couple rounds through the circuit. The latest version was an appeal of the original decision. And what that appeal concluded was that the local ordinance at the City of Berkeley is actually preempted by the Federal Energy Policy Conservation Act. So what that means is that the federal act is actually what regulates appliances, and what the court determined was that the City of Berkeley doesn't have the authority to regulate that component of their code. So essentially, our code is identical to Berkeley's in terms of what it requires of applicants. So what that means is, legally speaking, is that we're also at risk of being sued over our ordinance. So our council determined in June that we would temporarily suspend our ordinance, and just the component that's related to the building electrification, and then the remaining components are in place. So the reason we went with the suspension is because it just puts that part of the code on hold, and then as soon as as we understand it, there will be a rehearing, and Berkeley is going to appeal this decision, and if that decision is overturned, we can quickly reinstate our ordinance, and it would be immediately effective. Oh, yes, sorry about that. I'll move more forward. So moving on. So what I wanted to share with you is some of the other components of our REACH codes that are still in effect and that still have an impact on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So in existing buildings, in single family and multifamily buildings that are doing modifications that cost more than $50,000, and then in non-residential buildings that are doing modifications that cost more than $50,000 or are adding 1,000 square feet, they're required to do extra energy efficiency measures, so they can choose from a sampling of options to enhance their energy efficiency of their buildings. Things like LED lights, adding a heat pump water heater, adding additional attic insulation, or installing a cool roof. So with these things, they're going above and beyond what the basic code requires when they're doing their addition. The next section is related to EV charging. And what we require here is that all new single family homes be EV ready. And so that means that your electrical panel is ready to support EV charging, and that you have conduit running to the car, where the vehicle where the charging station would be installed in the future. For new multifamily, that would be 15% of parking spaces to actually have ready to use charging stations. For new non-residential and commercial sites, that would be an 8% requirement for parking spaces. And then for additions and alterations at non-residential sites, that would also be 8% of the parking spaces be EV charging capable. And then lastly, our local solar requirements. Thankfully, the state code does already incorporate requirements for new single family, multifamily, and non-residential, but our requirement addresses a gap, which is the existing non-residential. So if someone's coming in for that type of permit and they are increasing their total roof area by at least 1,000 square feet, by at least 1,000 square feet, and have a permit value of $1 million, they would also be required to install solar as part of their project. And then the last thing that we've actually had on our books for quite a while is by proxy related to energy efficiency is a gray water requirement, and that's for all new single-family homes are required to be dual plumbed for gray water. And what that does is when you're saving water, you're also saving the energy that's used to pump that water to your home. And then I wanted to share with you on this last slide, a few of the state and federal incentives that are currently available so that we use this to try to encourage people that are considering converting to all electric or getting more energy efficient appliances in their home. There's a lot of rebates available. So California Electric Homes, Energy Smart Homes, Golden State rebates, and then a great resource too is a website called The Switches On, and that site will actually search all of the rebates and incentives that are in your area by just typing zip code, and it'll show everything that you can save money on. And I'll wrap it up there, and thank you guys for your attention and interest in this topic.
Okay, I will. So, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but you showed something that the different elements of gas and the need to change to electric. And I'm just wondering if everybody in Encinitas went the direction that you want with electric, what would you actually save if everybody current, not what's going to happen in the future?
So that would be that pie chart that I showed earlier, and
That's what I'm saying. I didn't catch the numbers.
can you go back to the pie chart? Sorry about that. Yeah, so it would be the natural gas component, which is 14%. I don't have the exact number on the top of my head, but it's 14% of our total emissions from Encinitas. And then the other cool part, I'll just put a plug in for this, is for the electricity portion. Our electricity is also, if you chose to be a part of San Diego Community Power and have the power on, or the power 100 rate is even better. You're getting your electricity from 50% or 100% renewable power. So those in combination is what is really going to drive down the emissions in your home. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Crystal. And now I have this very long, detailed introduction for Congressman Levin. But I'm going to set that aside. I really don't think that he needs a lengthy introduction. I just want to say we're pleased that he could join us this evening. He's serving his third term in Congress, elected in 2018, when we flipped that 49th district. And in my opinion, has done a terrific job since he's been in Washington. So please welcome Congressman Levin.
For Harold, okay, for all the work that he does and for everybody here. All the other cities throughout the country to be half as innovative and forward thinking as Encinitas, I think we'd be in a better spot. What do you think? Definitely. Well, it's really interesting to be with you this evening. A couple of you were with me at the town hall that we just had, focused on climate. And it was our 102nd town hall that I've had since being in office. This one was with California Environmental Voters. Those of you who know that organization, we were specifically talking about climate. And what I was told is that there was a Republican presidential debate tonight. You know about that? I didn't watch it. I set it on DVR because I thought they might be entertaining and say ridiculous things, and that's what I heard happen. They were asked to raise their hand if they believe climate change is real. And what I was told, and I'm going to have to go verify this, is that not one of them raised their hand. And I sort of thought that juxtaposition was interesting because at the very same time that they were up there doing that, I was down the street here doing an entire town hall all about the most significant investments we've made on climate in the history of the United States or the history of any country. I think that's kind of a telling juxtaposition. But I thought what I would do, and I don't want to take too long because I want to leave plenty of time. for Q&A, and I have to get out of here around 8 o'clock, otherwise my wife is gonna kill me. So happy wife, happy life, that is the most important thing. But I thought what I would do first is thank the Sierra Club just for their decades of incredible advocacy here in North County, really throughout the country, but as a volunteer-driven organization with such a great purpose and a great group, it's really been an honor to work with you these last 5+ years, and I look forward to many, many years more. I can tell you that the last weekend, I think in really the last couple of weeks, if you had any doubt about the impact that climate crisis is having, I think it was all laid bare. Even this past Sunday, when we saw for the first time since 1939 a tropical storm threat in Southern California. And, fortunately, I think we were very prepared for it. But we still saw here in coastal Southern California about 1/6 of our average annual rainfall in one day. In one day. Meanwhile, we saw the incredible tragedy just a couple weeks ago in Maui. We see other extreme weather events all across the country. And I love to watch the PBS News Hour. Does anybody else watch PBS News? Oh, this is good. This is great. So did any of you see the climatologist that they had on yesterday? A couple of you did. So they had Michael Mann from the University of Pennsylvania. And I thought I would read just a couple of things that he said. And for a couple of you that were at the town hall, I apologize. This is repetition for you. I am not a climatologist, obviously. I am an recovering environmental attorney and somebody who listens to climatologists. So this is what Michael Mann had to say. Climate change is now showing us all of its weapons. These last couple of weeks, it's showing us everything it's got to offer, its full arsenal. And that's what we're seeing. So climate change is no longer some subtle, far off possible thing. It's here and now. It's impacting us here and now. And the dangerous impacts are occurring now. It's a question at this point of how bad we're willing to let it get. Of how bad we're willing to let it get. So that hit me because that's my lived existence day in and day out in Washington, D.C. I'm there about 130 days of the year with a lot of folks who think like those 8 or 9 Republican presidential candidates who wouldn't raise their hand when asked if they understood climate change is real. And I think they fall into a couple of buckets. One, genuinely doesn't believe, they won't accept, say belief. Belief is not the right term. They won't accept science, really of any kind. Doesn't matter if it's on climate or COVID or anything else. They won't accept science. Then there are others who do acknowledge and understand and accept the science, but the campaign finance system is so corrupt, they're beholden to the fossil fuel industry, to folks like the American Petroleum Institute and Koch Industries and the fossil fuel companies themselves. I don't have an easy answer other than to say we've got to keep fighting. When I got to Congress, I ran as a climate change advocate, as a clean energy advocate, making that central to the campaign. Many of you were there and you remember that. And I was told at the time by some of the consultants in Washington, D.C. that I should not use climate as the issue. I should not make my ballot designation clean energy advocate. And I thought that was ridiculous because when you run for office, you have to run authentically as who you are. And I remember there was an article by the Washington Examiner, which is a right-leaning Washington publication. It was a pretty good article, but the headline stuck with me. Democrat gambles campaign on climate change. And I thought, how silly is this? This is the overarching issue, the existential threat. It's not a gamble. The gamble would be having that professional background and trying to educate myself over the last 25 years or so, and to not act on that knowledge, to not make that primary focus. That would be, in my mind, far greater a gamble. So I got to Congress 2019, and Speaker Pelosi put me on the select committee for the climate crisis. I was one of 9 Democrats that were put on that committee, one of 3 freshmen. Very honored to serve on that committee. And we came up with an action plan back in 2020. We released it. And at that time, and still, it was the most comprehensive plan that Congress had ever put together on how to address the climate crisis in a manner commensurate with what science demands. And we put that plan together. knowing that we wouldn't get it all done, that we had to keep fighting. And we were very fortunate in 2020 to have elected a president who shared our values when it came to climate and the environment. Didn't agree on every single thing that he's done, but the big picture, we share the values. We no longer had a president who denied the problem or who thought that wind turbines cause cancer or that, we should go back to inefficient shower heads and toilets. He really said all that stuff. So what we were able to do, working with the new president and working with the Senate, is we turned that action plan into the Build Back Better legislation. And that Build Back Better legislation was enormous, not just on climate, but enormous. Then a certain senator from West Virginia, you might know who it is, decided to further pare it back. And that became what is known as the Inflation Reduction Act. But the Inflation Reduction Act is still, along with other things, the biggest investment in climate action ever. Roughly $370 billion that will dramatically change everything from the type of electricity that we generate to the type of buildings that we build, the type of vehicles we drive, our mass transit systems, all of it, hopefully in a positive way. And as we all know, it wasn't far enough, it didn't do enough, but we did something that I was told would be very, very difficult to do, and was difficult, by the way, which was pass a comprehensive climate bill. But that wasn't all. We passed two other bills that were really, really important when it comes to our climate and our environment. One of them was the infrastructure law. The infrastructure law wasn't all about climate, but it had the biggest investment in electric vehicle charging in history, $7.5 billion, and perhaps just as significant for our community, it had the biggest investment in water resiliency by tenfold that the federal government had ever made. $1 billion for water recycling. In fact, already we funded two projects in this district, $19 million for the Levin Municipal Water District for their recycling project, and $10 million for Oceanside from the bipartisan infrastructure law. We funded over $100 million so far in projects from the bipartisan infrastructure law. And we have the opportunity to finally fix our rail corridor for the next couple of centuries, not just the next couple of decades, using funds from the bipartisan infrastructure law. And so this is a transformative opportunity. It's the biggest investment in infrastructure since Eisenhower. The other big bill is the CHIPS and Science Act, because the CHIPS and Science Act will accelerate our ability to manufacture microchips and semiconductors in the United States that we need for everything, that we need for all the clean energy technologies that are out there, that we need for our vehicles, that we need for our computers and our phones. It's a huge sea change with regard to climate and just about everything else with regard to industrial policy in the United States. So you add it all up, and the work that we did on the Climate Committee, along with the Natural Resources Committee, a lot of that work made it in. Now, not everything. I got certain provisions, oil and gas related provisions, increasing royalty rates and making oil companies pay their fair share. The first time in 100 years that we made it more difficult and more expensive, just making it fair for these companies who want to extract on federal lands. Just the same on for our future of our energy resources. Now finally seeing a path to accelerate that transition to a more sustainable future. It's now real. We haven't gone far enough though. One of the things that didn't make it in was a bill that I led that we passed in the House, but we couldn't get through the Senate, and that was to ban drilling off the California coast. And you might say, well, wouldn't that hurt oil prices or gas prices if we did that? The reality is that what we extract from the California coast is a drop in the bucket compared to what the overall needs are. And the reality is it just doesn't make sense to be drilling off the coast of Southern California. So I'm going to keep at it. And I'm not giving up until the job is done. We've got big problems. We live in probably the most beautiful district in the United States. We go all the way up to Laguna Niguel, all the way down to Del Mar. Not bad, right? 52 miles of beautiful California coastline. But we've got real challenges. We've got real challenges when it comes to our rail corridor, our eroding beaches, our bluffs. We've got real challenges when it comes to the nuclear waste smack dab in the middle of our district. That's been a top priority of mine and always will be until the job is done, to finally get that waste off our coast as quickly and as safely as we can. We've got other challenges too, unrelated to the work of the Sierra Club and not for this conversation, but nothing is perfect. But we've got an extraordinary community, and I love the opportunity to continue to roll up my sleeves each and every day. So the last thing I will say before taking a few questions and getting home to my wife and kids before they get mad at me, is just that I hope that each of you know, the important work that you do really does matter at the end of the day. It can't just be from Washington, D.C. or from Sacramento or even at the city level. It's got to be from each of us. Individual decisions that we make, that we are the change that we wish to see. I was asked in the town hall an hour ago about how we can try to bridge some of the partisan divides that exist, some of the polarization in our politics. And my answer is, try to lead by example. As my father-in-law likes to say, kill them with kindness. So when you see somebody who needs help, you see your neighbor who's pulled over on the side of the road with a flat tire, you don't look at their bumper sticker to see if they agree with you on politics. You just help them out. That's who I think we are as people. We might not always get that in return, but I think if we lead by example, every day that I get to do this job, I know as a federal representative, as one of 435, I'm not going to be able to unilaterally change how things are going by myself. But I also know that I have an opportunity to use that responsibility that the voters have given me every couple of years, either try to bring people together or try to, use that position to divide out of political self-interest. And there are a lot of my colleagues that use that position to divide on the basis of political self-interest. They think they're auditioning to be a host on cable news. And I just don't think that's why I'm sent there. I think I'm sent there to try to, with whatever opportunity I have, to try to bring people together. So I appreciate you keep sending me back. I appreciate the work the Sierra Club does. So I want to thank Harold, thank everybody here. For those of you that sat through the town hall and just sat through what I had to say, you earn extra points tonight. And I want to thank Shannon Bradley as well. So Shannon does an extraordinary job in our district office, working incredibly hard for our constituents. And it's a lot of the work that you don't necessarily hear about in the news, but day to day is the most impactful work that we do, whether it's helping out on any immigration related matter or any veterans related matter or any IRS related matter, all that blocking and tackling. So if anybody does require any sort of federal assistance, please do contact our office. And many of you know how to get in touch with us, but it's just levin.house.gov, or you can bother either one of us anytime. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. Let's take some questions. A couple questions. Whatever works.
So there is one question online, if you want
One
to.
question online.
Yeah. So the question online is, can you speak about your work on permitting reform?
Who is that on the
It's
chat?
Peter Davis.
Hi, Peter. So we have to protect the National Environmental Policy Act, for one. I am a recovering environmental attorney, but some of my colleagues seem to think that the solution is to just gut bedrock environmental law, and I don't agree with that. So let me put it in context. In order to do all the clean energy that we need to do, in order to get from A to B with regard to our greenhouse gas reduction targets, we're going to need to deploy a huge amount of new renewable energy across the United States. And that's going to require us to dramatically increase the rate with which we build out transmission and distribution, the electric grid. And so I think that's the problem. Those who are most interested in changing NEPA and focusing on permitting reform probably want a backdoor to do more fossil fuel. That's been my experience. So does that mean NEPA is perfect? It's not perfect. It can be streamlined. There are certain aspects of it that can be difficult, but I don't think NEPA is the problem. I think building out that transmission infrastructure requires the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, to have more jurisdiction over multi-state, multi-gigawatt transmission. Because it shouldn't be easier to build a multi-state pipeline than to build a multi-state transmission line, right? But today, it's a heck of a lot easier to build that multi-state pipeline. So I have a bill, along with my friend Sean Castor from Illinois. Sean and I ran in 2018 as two people from the clean energy industry who are running for Congress on that issue and wanted to work on that issue. And we have what is becoming the de facto House Democratic bill on transmission. And we're going to be rolling it out in September when I get back. On the other side, you got the Joe Manchins of the world. And he obviously represents West Virginia, a fossil fuel state, coal state. And so he's looking out for his state, and I'm gonna look out for the rest of us. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Doing work with the IRA, we're hearing from our Sierra Club counterparts all across the nation. It's coming. We're getting it organized at the state level, but be patient because there are 400 streams of funding, much of which has to be done through grants.
Yeah.
So just a little bit of feedback in the future, if there's a way to start to consolidate things and make it a little bit more straightforward, because I think people are going to lose their focus and we may end up not figuring out how to expend that money in the way that we would really like to.
What was your name?
Carl.
Carl. Couldn't agree with you more. Deeply frustrating to see how long it takes for the federal bureaucracy to get in gear. But the good news is we have 10 years with this bill. 10 years of predictability on the tax policy, 10 years of predictability on other incentives. And so that gives me great encouragement. I do know of a huge amount of private investment that has already come in that would not have been possible but for those policies. Around $150 billion of private investment has already come in. A lot of that is in red states, by the way. As Speaker Pelosi used to say all the time, they vote no and take the dough. Sort of what's happening. But I was approached by one of my Republican colleagues and friends who said, yeah, how did you guys do that? How did you realize all that money was going to go? I said, we didn't, right? It's where those investments make the most sense. And my hope, and I knock wood because I don't know, Carl, how we make this a reality, is that when my friends across the aisle see the clean energy investments and the jobs that come into their districts, that all of a sudden maybe they'll be more open-minded about some of these policy ideas that we have. So maybe that's wishful thinking on my part. I don't know. I got to go see that Republican presidential debate where nobody would even acknowledge the existence of the problem. But you got to have hope, and we got to keep trying. If I didn't have any hope, I wouldn't have tried running for Congress in the first place. I wouldn't have fought so hard for all those provisions that are now the law. Hi,
I have a question for you.
excellent.
Paige, by the way.
Thank you, Paige.
I know you could talk just about the grid and, all the infrastructure, but are you or anybody else at the federal level looking at more resilient microgrids at the local level to, do away with the need for so much grid?
We are, but not as much as I'd like. So distributed energy resources and microgrids are critically important. And ultimately, the future of the grid will be microgrids, and I think the centralization will be really important. The good news is that we're leading in California, and specifically in San Diego, and a couple places that immediately come to mind are UC San Diego and Miramar, the Bays, both of which have done all they can to try to create really cutting edge research and innovation. I think it's the future. Now, the utilities don't love it because they like their business model as it is. And if you're in a wires and poles business, then you don't want decentralization. But I see that as one of the three big trends: decarbonization, electrification, decentralization. We're going to need to do all three. Yes, you were at the town hall, so you got another. I mean, I'm with you. I'm ready for round 3. Let's do it. Do we have any more meetings to go to? I got my wife's going to get back. Yes.
So thank you for everything that you've been doing in Congress. You really been
Thank you.
doing a fantastic job, and thank you for not taking oil money. I was wondering if you could tell us what the House Climate Caucus that you're on. What are you doing there? Are you incubating thoughts and
Well,
bills
it's
or
funny.
whatever?
The House Select Committee on the Climate Crisis was disbanded by Kevin McCarthy. So it's a every select committee is a creation of the House Speaker at the time. When Nancy Pelosi was the Speaker, she created the House Select Committee on Climate and other select committees as well, all of which I think did really admirable and important work. Now that McCarthy is Speaker, I implored him, please keep this committee going. Call it whatever you like. Call it the Committee on Fossil Fuels are great. I don't care, but keep the discussion going and allow the dialogue to continue in a bipartisan way. But he killed the committee and he replaced it with the Committee on the Weaponization of this, that, and the other, and the Committee on this and that. And that's a huge disservice to the American people. But so long as you have them not willing to raise their hand, that's where we are. Now, the good news is that despite McCarthy's decision to do that, we still have the Sustainable Energy and Environment Coalition, SEEK, which I'm a proud member of, and there are over 100 members of SEEK. These are people not just voting for climate legislation, but actually writing it. And so that's a huge amount of intellectual capacity that we have in the Congress. And then there are probably, I don't know, a handful of us anyway in the House that have actually had background in environmental policy and law. And I think we're doing a lot. We work together all the time. I just mentioned this transmission bill that I'm working on with my friend Sean Caston. My roommate and landlord in Washington, D.C. is a guy named Jared Huffman. Jared used to work for the Natural Resources Defense Council before going to the state assembly and then going to the House. And we work together on lots of stuff as well on the Natural Resources Committee. Right, I'm hearing beeping. Is that me? No.
What do you think the chances are we're gonna get the government to shut down in September? Just curious to know what the move is.
What was your name? Richie? Richard, I think there is an excellent chance that the government is going to shut down. My crystal ball is not perfect, but the position that we are in right now in the House is that you have a Speaker of the House who was elected on the 15th ballot. And y'all remember that? And as a result of that, he's really been in survival mode ever since. And there are a handful of people in the Freedom Caucus, a couple dozen, that sort of have dictated the terms of what we consider on the floor. And I give McCarthy credit that he's survived this long, given the terms.
How do we resolve it though? I think it looks like we're heading for a wreck.
Well,
My question is, how do we get beyond it?
That's a great question. So I think there are a couple things that might happen. One of two things that I can see, two paths. Path one, which I think is more likely, is that McCarthy cares about survival above all else. He adheres to the hard line of the Freedom Caucus, and as a result, shuts the government down for some period of time. Now, in 2019, that was 35 days that the government was shut down because of those same hardline folks. And there are points about, wanting to have legislation on anti-woke this, that, and the other. I mean, these are things that will never, never, never pass in the United States Senate. They don't care. They'd rather make a point than make policy at the end of the day. And so that's the likely outcome, though, is that we have a shutdown. Over the weekend, I was with an economist who I respect deeply, Mark Zandi of Moody's Analytics. And he said that, because I asked, what is the actual economic impact if we shut the government down? And he said, for every week that we are shut down, it's 0.1% impact on that quarter's GDP. So we're shut down for a month, 0.4% for that quarter. It's not great. So that's the most likely scenario, is that we're shut down for some period of time until McCarthy feels that he's got enough leverage with the far right Freedom Caucus folks to cut some sort of deal. The other alternative is that he works with us and we do a continuing resolution or we pass a budget. We could do it like that. Honestly, Richard, we could do it. We could be done in a week. We really could. you could get enough moderate Republicans to work with the House Democrats to get it done. There are enough people across the aisle that would do it. McCarthy, though, isn't interested in passing stuff as much as he's interested in survival. And that's where I think the shutdown is all but inevitable. But I've been wrong before. And I'm sure I'll be wrong again. It's just that's where things appear to be headed. Now, here's a couple points. We have to pass the budget by the end of the year, one way or the other. If we don't, then there'll be a huge. Originally, we will have to pass it by October the 1st, but stuff really hits the fan if we don't do it by the end of the year. In other words, the debt ceiling deal included provisions saying that all spending goes down by 1% across the board, defense and non-defense, if we don't pass that budget by the end of the year. All the community projects used to be known as earmarks in all the districts across the country, Republican and Democratic alike. All that goes away if we don't pass a budget by the end of the year. So I don't think those Republican members of Congress are going to want to be part of cutting military spending, as an example. And so that's why I'm optimistic that it will work out before the end of the year. Once again, you know, these guys, I guess, want to wreck the holiday season. I don't know. Bah humbug. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. One more? Yes, sir. You got 2 events, 2 questions, man. I love it.
That's Jim Long Carter.
How are you, Jim?
Thanks. I hope I can ask you another question, but you keep on hitting on the ballpark. So I'm sure you
Got to ask tougher questions. No.
Trying. So in 2015, as everyone knows, that's climate accord in Paris.
Yeah.
But really that was part of a larger agenda. It's called the Agenda 2030. Things 17 sustainability, going both SDGs, cover a whole bunch of social, economic, environmental goals. But we don't hear too much about that. And so I'm wondering, is there any attention being paid to that in Congress, federal government?
Not enough. Every time that we try to fund international climate action, we get no support across the aisle. So I've had the pleasure of getting to go to COP now in different parts of the world, and I hope to go back at the end of the year. It depends if Leader Jeffries can find an airplane. Basically, I mean, it's seriously, I'll fly coach. I don't care, but we want to go to COP and we want to present the best of what the United States has to offer with regard to our greenhouse gas reduction strategy and all that we got done. The challenge is that we had a gap during the last administration where we had to go in spite of the administration, not in concert with the administration. So it went from we're in, you know, we're leading the charge with President Obama to we had a climate denier as president in the last administration, to reminding the international community that we're all in, to then losing the majority in the House to climate denying Republicans, reminding them we're still in. Our message this time will be we're still in. And we got the IRA done, we got the infrastructure law done, we're still in. And I hope that that resonates. But our ability to lead the world and to demonstrate the economic common sense of taking action on climate, it's not just about our environment, it's about our economy as well and all the jobs that we'll create. And we've got evidence now of all of that economic output. But for the rest of the world to follow, the rest of the industrialized world to follow, much less other nations, we've got to demonstrate that it makes good economic sense, and we've all got to be on the same page. So there hasn't been enough, and we could talk about loss and damage, which is the desire of some developing nations to get the developed world to foot the bill for some of the damage that's been done to this planet. And that's been a non-starter with my friends across the aisle as well, and is controversial even on our side. So long story short, we just got to keep at it. But I'm very grateful to y'all. If I can ever be of any assistance, again, levin.house.gov, and come visit us in Washington, D.C. And I hope to see you again soon. Thanks for having me.
about one more round of applause for the executive. All on page, yeah. Yes, Paige? Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna call on B.
Taking the mic.
I'm with the Carlsbad Sierra Club group, and we have a couple of petitions, if you let any Carlsbad residents in here. Okay, never mind. Oh, I can talk to them.
Okay, and tonight we have B. Yeah, I was gonna screw up the last name. We have B with us from 350.org. And she's in the back with the 350.org t-shirt on, so she'll be easy to recognize. And she may have already approached several of you about signing a petition for the Citizens Transportation Initiative. The Sierra Club has taken a support position on this initiative. And if you have not had the opportunity to sign, I would encourage you to do so before you leave this evening. He is very well informed on the ins and outs of what this initiative proposes to do, but basically it would levy a small increase in the countywide sales tax to raise funds for Sandag to work on some of the transportation improvement projects across the county. I think that's kind of it in a nutshell. There's a lot more involved with it than that. There's some subtleties there and some ins and outs, but I would talk to B before you leave, please. If you have not signed, please consider signing the petition. And with that, unless somebody has.
Yes.
Harold, I'd like to.
Yes, please.
I'd like to introduce Charles. Is our new-
Charles, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Charles is our.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. No, it's me.
Hello.
Yeah.
So Charles is our new organizer with Sierra Club. He's going to be working in South San Diego, but he's here tonight to learn about all the good work that you guys are doing. So I'll let Charles say a few words.
Hi, everyone. As Carl said, my name is Charles. Very happy to be here tonight. I just started with the Sierra Club about 2 weeks ago, and I just moved to San Diego a few months ago. So really just wanted to spend some time tonight to get to know you all, to know the issues that are important to you, and just see how things are done up here. So thank you all. Very, very excited to be here, and definitely looking forward to working with you all more in the future.
San Diego, and welcome to the Sierra Club. Oh, any other announcements? Seeing none, I think that we can adjourn this meeting slightly before 8 o'clock. Brought it in on time and on target. Thank you for coming. Here, Lisa.